I want to bring in Pete Thamel from Sports Illustrated. The cover story is on Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu, and it's the big cover story there in the back of the magazine. Pete joins us now. Pete, I guess separate fact from fiction if you can. Why is Honey Badger not playing for the team this year?
Well, Dan, Tyrann Mathieu is not playing for the team this year because he failed multiple marijuana tests. And basically LSU had no choice but to suspend him for the season. He went to drug rehab for a month and now is just sort of living a low-key life as a regular student at LSU.
NCAA violations or just team violations with Mathieu?
Well, for what he did now in his sitting out for this season, those were failed drug tests. What our story on SI.com right now uncovers is that potentially Mathieu broke some rules that could inhibit his return.
Okay, give me some details.
All right. Well, what he did, Dan, was he promoted a rap group that he was kind of part of, a crew of his friends from home called Air Nation, and appeared in multiple online videos promoting that, which is an NCAA no-no. And we quote some in the story saying he got VIP access at a club that he was promoting, and he appears on a flyer knowingly promoting this club and a party at this club and such. So multiple times after LSU's season ended last year, Tyrann Mathieu was out there, essentially blatantly breaking NCAA rules in a public forum by promoting this local nightclub in Baton Rouge.
But this had nothing to do with him being suspended from the team. This is something new, or did Les Miles know about this as well, and it was an NCAA violation waiting to happen, therefore don't have him play in a game that you could lose?
No, LSU did not know about this. These are new things that were just brought forth by our reporting this week. And as Tyrann is deciding this winter whether to go to the NFL draft or whether to return, we don't know, but this could certainly come into play in his decision-making because he's likely going to be facing scrutiny.
What else did you learn about his background, family background, that maybe led to this point in his life?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think he's the most compelling person in college football, even though he's not playing. He's the rare, defensive player who became, the player. He was the it player last year, and I really think he's still one of the most talked about players this year. He has an unbelievably complicated family background. His father is in jail for murdering a man. It's actually the facility he's in now. He's a medium security inmate. Is 14 miles south of Baton Rouge. And when Tyrann was 2, his father Darren Hayes was put in jail for murdering a man. He was raised by an uncle who he considers a father in New Orleans, and basically it hasn't been easy sledding for Tyrann Mathieu. And that the story really gets into a lot of the obstacles that he's had to overcome.
Has he talked to his father?
We exchanged numerous letters with the father, and Thayer Evans, who I wrote the story with, wrote Darren Hayes in jail. And the interesting thing is that about 30 years ago, Darren Hayes was at a similar crossroads in his life. He was the best running back in the city of New Orleans, sort of an undersized, dynamic player, much like his son. He had high scholarship offers, didn't academically qualify, ended up going to Alcorn State. Alcorn State's coach at the time was a Hall of Famer who told us that, Darren Hayes had NFL talent. He got thrown out of school for having a gun on campus and basically went into a spiral of drugs and violence that ended with him, in his current fate in jail now. So the story we kind of write is, here's 30 years later, Tyrann Mathieu's at a similar crossroads. Drugs has derailed his career temporarily, and, will he make the right decisions, and will he make this a happy ending?
He's Pete Thamel from Sports Illustrated, senior writer, former New York Times college football writer. The cover story in Sports Illustrated is about Honey Badger at LSU. Let me go back to the drug test. How many drug tests did he fail?
The reports are that he had failed 3. And John Lucas, who did his drug rehab in Houston, who I spent some time with, told me that he only tested positive for marijuana. So it wasn't performance enhancing. It wasn't harder drugs. And what Lucas did when Matthew went to Houston for rehab, he put him in an inpatient facility, which is very rare for someone who abuses marijuana. And what Lucas did is basically put him with OxyContin addicts and, hardcore drug addicts to basically say, look, man, this is the path you're heading. And Lucas has a great saying. There's going to be a Q&A with him that goes up on SI.com today. He says, the same marijuana a homeless guy smokes is the same marijuana you're smoking in the NBA. And he brings his guys to this facility to show them you're not that different than these hardcore drug addicts. There's not a lot of difference between the drug addicts in the Motel 6 and the drug addicts in the Four Seasons.
Any chance he plays football again in college?
Yeah, I do think there is a chance. There's just going to be some things for him to work through. That's what he wants. Lucas told me that he doesn't feel like Tyron has a professional mindset yet, and by that means he likes college, he likes the camaraderie. He wants to go play video games with his buddies after practice. And as you well know, Dan, that when you're in the NFL, the game ends and guys go off with their families, and it's just a totally different vibe. And he said he didn't think Tyron was, had that professional mindset yet. So I think the aim is for him to return to college. And that's the goal. And Les Miles no one would directly say we want Tyrann Mathieu back, but that's very much the vibe around the LSU program. Les Miles was, basically all but said, he's on the road to coming back, but doesn't want to quite say that yet.
Yeah, we have Les Miles on the show tomorrow. That's why I was curious if you thought he would play again, and that's why he's back on campus. Is Les Miles doing him a favor by allowing him even back and being around the program, or giving him that carrot to possibly play again?
I don't think it's a favor. I think most coaches would do that for players. Tyrann Mathieu meant, millions of dollars of positive publicity at LSU, and he basically carried them to the national title game last year. So things in his life appeared to spiral out of control after last season ended. And, I think LSU's, doing the right thing here. And LSU's letting him back. Now, he cannot go to the football facility. He works out. He plays pickup basketball almost every day in the rec center on LSU's campus. And, I think LSU's just letting him figure it out. And he has limited contact, with the program just because he's not allowed over at the facility. Les has told me he's engaged with him and been in touch with him, and he said, Tyrann's focus is on getting better. So the feel is that's the aim right now. Whether that changes or not, no one knows.
Because I wonder what his potential is. If I'm an NFL scout, I don't know if you've talked to any of just what's more, what concerns them more, his ability on the field that they see, and is he limited, or do you worry about the off the field? Therefore, he's not going to be a high draft pick.
Yeah, I talked to about 5 GMs, personnel people, scouts, and he's a fascinating case. And you've obviously been around the NFL draft for years, Dan, and seen, these types of cases, the hyper-productive player in college who doesn't have the measurables. And so Tyrann Mathieu essentially is 5'7" and change, and he's not going to run a 4.2. He's going to be a mediocre speed guy. And his lot in NFL life, by projection anyways, he's probably going to be a slot corner, and he's going to be a special teams player, but a dynamic one, a dynamic punt returner. And he's probably the best punt returner I've seen in all my years covering college football. So, but that's why, in the story we say he's projected as a third-round pick. And, it's going to be one of those teams that, likes an energy guy, a spark plug guy. I could see, the Jets taking him. Rex obviously loves corners. We all know that. But I really don't think he's going to measure well. There's obviously going to be off-field concerns and questions. He's going to be, poked and prodded and such. But he's really going to be a fascinating NFL test case because he's the classic guy who, when he's in Indianapolis, at the combine, he's not going to test particularly well, measure particularly well. And quite frankly, he's not a dynamic cover corner.
Yep.
He's a big play guy. Alabama picked on him in the national title game last year. John Lucas joked with me that every time Tyrann talked back to him, he'd say, "Son, I have 2 words for you. Roll Tide." Which I thought was pretty good.
That's tough love. Tough love.
Yes, that is. He said he would quiet down. He would quiet down immediately. you think about the LSU secondary from last year. Claiborne obviously was the sixth pick in the draft, and they had two other draft picks. They have Reed, who's a safety now, who started for them, who's probably going to be a first round pick. So Tyron, within that system and surrounded by that talent, was able to gamble. He was able to be the honey badger and, take risks and, go after the ball and different things because he was surrounded by such talented players. So, one NFL guy told me, there's a risk if he comes back, it would be hard to top his season as a defensive back as a sophomore. So if he comes back and maybe doesn't have quite all the big plays that he did, which quite frankly would be very difficult to duplicate, does that all of a sudden hurt him too? So it's his NFL future is very tricky. That said, I think he'll play in that league. I mean, one NFL guy was like, look, you watch the game on Sundays. I mean, everyone's five receivers, guarding tight ends, obviously, with the Patriots and teams like that are doing. I mean, you need a very good slot corner. So he's going to have a job. And he's, obviously proven to be a capable, productive player.
Good stuff, Pete. We look forward to reading the entire issue there, Sports Illustrated. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Dan, thanks for having me.
All right, Pete Thamel from Sports Illustrated.